Hello again, welcome to RP-0 America. This might just be a quick short video where we are just approaching Venus. Can't see it out here, but we have the craft we built and launched in a previous video. It's just approaching the sphere of influence of Venus here. Alright, let's move those. Alright. So this satellite has a Scansat on it, and we have something previously that had just enough delta V to get into orbit of Venus. So that's still hanging out here. All right, and we're way closer to the sun, so we don't have any trouble with electric charge. All right, Venus encounter. I've changed the way time warp feels for me. And by that I mean it now it kind of auto warps into it rather than kind of taking a bunch of time to go in and out of time warp. So let's see, hyperbolic. So I wanted to see if there's a way, if I can adjust. Of course, I closed it right before I end up wanting to use it. Maneuver, editor. All right, so let's just set up one. So I want to try to get as polar as possible because the more polar your orbit is, the better. So let's see if I can actually adjust it to be more polar or not. So radial's just going to tug me in closer. I think we're too close to the planet now to have any real impact on that, but it looks like normal might be able to do that. So let's move normal, and then now that I'm actually in the sphere of influence, I can see the number of how polar we are or not. So we're kind of retrograde, I think. I think that's what the 150 means. Oh. All right, so just get rid of that for now. So looking at just this number, yeah, to me it looks like that's becoming more polar. I think polar would be just like 0, right? Let's try being on the other side of this just because I want to keep the periapsis relatively low, because that's going to be where we have the most ability to alter our to actually basically capture. So it's fairly important to us that that happens, or else we just get one flyby and we just kind of get one blast with the Scansat rather than getting to get the whole thing. Just kind of get to do multiple passes over the planet with a Scansat, which is where we're going to get the science. And we probably won't be landing anything on Venus for quite a while, and it looks like this is also making us more polar to boot, so that is awesome. And we had 200 kilometers, that's close enough. The atmosphere, I don't remember exactly where it starts, 130 or 150, 145. All right, sounds good. All right, so we can just warp to that. This is actually going to tell us when we've got science coming up. So warp to here, day and a half. So yeah, it just whiplashes right up into time warp. And this Ranger craft is cycling in and out. And we still have... So I could have put a heat shield or something on this and aerobraked, either for a landing or just rather than using fuel to capture us into Venus's orbit, I could have instead used used some kind of aerobraking technique. But I didn't. Oh, come on, pop out of time warp. Oh, right, it says to hit slash. I always kind of habitually want to do something different, usually. Hit escape or something else, I'm not sure why. All right, capture lots of science, add maneuver to capture. So hopefully we have enough delta V. Yep, good. We can get into a better orbit. Oh, not perfect, we can't get terribly low. So we're only going to get a limited number of passes. Sorry, I might be able to use aerobraking actually. I'll experiment with that later, but first I'll just get a basic capture, maybe out to like a 1-day orbit or something like that, where it takes a day, not an exact day between passes, because that will also be useless for scanning. But let us reorient. So this is lovely Venus, although it's not showing the clouds because I don't currently have that installed. Don't have RSSVE in its fullness currently installed. Just be kind of experimenting with other things, and therefore my memory usage is relatively high, and so I just didn't want to add that in as well. All right, so get to a nice retrograde position. or retro to, say, our current direction of travel. All right. And turn on this engine. Just make sure I don't end up dipping into the atmosphere right now. I just want to do this burn to get the capture, and then I can consider kind of just skimming. Basically, I know this has been done for a number of other missions, maybe not necessarily at Venus, definitely at Mars, where you use fuel to ensure you're going to get a capture for your satellite. Maybe Maven did this or something, but you use fuel to get your basic capture, and then, oh, all right, let's get some science. And then when you're at your apo, fairly high apoapsis, you make an adjustment to your periapsis, so it's just kind of skimming within the atmosphere. And you do multiple passes like that, where you're just skimming a little bit through the atmosphere, gradually bringing down your apoapsis without having to spend the fuel to do so. So doing this burn down here. So we're not captured yet, relative to, I guess, Venus's. Venus is not too dissimilar from Earth, right, in terms of its mass and its size. And so these numbers are relatively comparable. And same with thrust-to-weight ratio. Yeah, next thing after this will be the Manned Orbital Laboratory. And we don't quite have the tech for that yet, although we are kind of in the early stages of constructing it. And that will be our very first space station, which will lead us to some more interesting space stations. Kind of ahistorical. Well, I guess MOL is ahistorical as well. But some fun stuff from the Apollo Applications program. So we're gradually coming down to a capture. I'm not going to use all the delta V. I may as well just delete this. Because I'm going to try to maybe go into a one-day orbit or something like that, or a multi-day orbit even, then see if I can maybe bring myself down a little further. Because I definitely can do better than this orbit. This I don't have the orbital specs of that one, but it is definitely many days to cycle that orbit, and we have enough fuel to do better than that. All right, so let's just tick on this. So it's currently a basically double this number, because it's time from the periapsis to the apoapsis. So 2 day, that's a 2-day orbit. Let's see, so we're just a little below 2 days. Okay, so let's just stop there for a moment. So we are captured, and as you can see, we've got the Scansat scanner on. All right, so we'll add this maneuver and adjust it a bit. So if we were to spend all of our delta V, where would we end up? So we would end up in a, that can't be right, a 4-day orbit? Maybe that would just be, maybe that's because it's just behind me or something. Come on, don't, just leave it be. Let me leave it. There we go. Okay, it's letting me leave it. So no, it's still saying 4 days. So that's, none of that's right. All right. Let's turn that off. So 2-day orbit now. So let's just put a tiny maneuver node, I guess put it just ahead of us and spend some of this delta V. So if we spend pretty much all of it, we're going to end up with a, there we go, so times that by 2. So we'll end up with a bit less than a 1-day orbit, but this is way above the ideal altitude. So ideally, we're going to be, right now we're in an orbit where when we're low down like this, here, let me focus on the craft. So when we focus, oh, and of course I renamed the craft because Magellan, I believe, is one of the first craft to go do serious scans of Venus, so I figure I may as well just borrow the name because it's a good name. So we are scanning, and we're only going to get scans like this when we're close to the surface. So let's see, Scansat for map. So right now we're getting a good, we're getting a strip of altitude data. That is Earth. Let's see, celestial body. I thought this previously just selected the body you were near, but apparently it doesn't. So there we go. So we just have a strip of altitude data here for Venus. And pretty soon we're going to end up too high to get data. So here, I peg it so we can see the altitude, and 300, 400. So I think, yeah, there we go, over 500. So anything over 500, we're not getting data. So only this little strip here where we're within 500 kilometers would be where we're getting data. And so the further down we can bring the periapsis, or the apoapsis, the larger an area we're going to be actually getting data for. Because right now we're only going to get it kind of just around the equator here, and only during this strip while we're coming close. So I will definitely take the opportunity to try to adjust this, but I won't do it right now because it's honestly something I haven't tried at Venus. It's an interesting experiment that I want to kind of see how it's going to play out first. But we have successfully put this craft into orbit of Venus, and there's definitely some more stuff we can get done with it. So let's just see. Yeah, there's not enough data yet to do science, but that's okay. We are now in orbit, and then I can fiddle with that in the future. So we are in orbit of Venus here. So just to kind of add a bit more time to this video, let's go take a look at the state of things. Pretty shortly we're going to have the technology for early space stations, and then we'll have to wait a cycle of a few months for it to get the technology for large solids, because we're using like a Titan 3 type rocket, Titan 3C type rocket to launch our space station. And yeah, I may as well go into the Bab and show that off. Show off that station to fill out some time. So we can see it's under construction. I've already got this ready for Mars window when that comes around. Still waiting. So we're really going to need those technologies in order to be able to do the next mission, which is getting people into space stations. There's another video. It won't be part of this series because I was doing it in stock, but I did a really cool, I call it a proof of concept of using a tether to generate artificial gravity by spinning your craft relative to a spent stage. And so I did it in stock with Blue Dog Design Bureau, the Apollo and Saturn upper stage, and I had them spin, and they did a really great job. And with persistent rotation and things, and I could switch it so that it acts as all of one vessel, and I could keep that rotation, so it worked really well, and I can use that to generate artificial gravity for my people in many situations. So I'll be posting that video to this channel, just not to this playlist. All right, so what do I want to show off? Many craft in here. So this probably is the station. So as it said, it has locked parts. So I don't think I've shown this yet. So it's the Manned Orbital Laboratory Station. And I don't remember, oh no, this isn't the final version. This was kind of a testing. This isn't it yet. But I mean, this kind of shows it off. What I actually created does have has a docking system on it, because it has to be able to dock with Gemini. But you can see the first two stages are very large solid rocket motors. So if I've used any solid engines at all, other than just like upper stage ones, I've used small things like the Castor. So very clearly very small. Those are just kind of used to get a boost off of the launch pad. These are their own stage. These two solids, they even have gimbal. They're very heavy, very heavy. Each of them is like, they're heavier than like a full Atlas vehicle, which is a whole rocket. So they act as their own first stage for this vehicle, take you off the pad, take you up into space a bit, and that only then does this core engine with its engine fire. So many stages on this, and something looks like it's a little wonky because the whole delta V isn't showing, because there is an engine here. But of course, I'll have to adjust. So hot staging as usual. Let's just quickly check. No, it's set up right. So something's just crazy. That's okay. Doesn't matter. This isn't the final version, but it'll be this, nice space station, lots of life support resources that'll keep 2 astronauts alive and able to do science in orbit for quite some time. So it'll be our first sortie into space stations. And it is a pretty heavy space station, but yeah, I do like to launch it from a Titan because that was the original concept. Yeah, I'll have to poke through. Yeah, I have a lot of craft here just from lots of different things I've done. Let's see, and I've done some real SRU testing just to kind of bring that back up to make sure I'll be able to use it. So Titan, there we go. This is probably the actual correct craft. There we go. So of course, yeah, it should be in a fairing, and I've got a docking port on it. There we go, and it's able to maneuver itself a little bit. It uses this. it's not clicking when I want. Yeah, I want the stage inside. It's using the tran stage. So right now it's labeled, showing you the engine that it is, but this is it's a fuel tank and a really interesting looking engine that you'll see later, and it's called the tran stage. And yeah, it's able to dock with the Gemini. So I just need to also make sure I've got the technology for those docking clamps. Basically, Geminauts will climb through the heat shield and then through kind of a tunnel or tube through the service module and stuff, and will attach to here into the space station. Because we haven't yet developed Apollo hardware, because we had no need for it to get to the moon. But with the Apollo applications project, all the ideas that we had shelved when we decided not to use Apollo to take us to the moon. Now we've rolled out those ideas, and we're going to be using them for all kinds of things, including I'll show you one more craft before we close here. So that's this first space station. We'll be using it to take people into orbit. So the thing I've done the most interesting experimenting with is what's going to allow us to stay on the moon for a long time. So this is just a mass test article, but I do have a more advanced one. Now, it looks really silly in its current form here, but it is a lunar shelter. And so rather than sending additional people to the moon with this will all be thrown towards the moon, and this will be used as a crasher stage. So the amount of fuel in here will be enough to first break us into lunar orbit, to slow us down, so we're in orbit of the moon with all this hardware and this, and then it will also bring us down. We'll use the remaining fuel in this to bring the lunar shelter down towards the surface of the moon, slow us down somewhat. And so that means the lunar ascent stage, the lunar descent stage, won't even have to do all the work of landing. It will only have to do what remains after this crasher stage has slowed us down substantially. And then as a shelter, this upper stage, what we'll have there, won't be an ascent stage. It will just be filled with life support resources. All the fuel tanks and stuff will actually, it'll have its own fuel cell, and it will be a place for 2 astronauts to live on the moon for a long time, for many, many weeks, possibly a month and a half, 2 months. Depends how much life support supplies I can bring. But that's the idea of the lunar shelter. It's, if you can look it up, it was part of the Apollo applications project, where they're thinking, well, with the hardware we've developed for the actual historical moon program, what can we use this hardware for beyond just the short the Apollo H-class mission for a very short stay on the moon, or the J-class mission to the moon. Also, oh no, I don't have it on here, but I was also experimenting with sending a rover to the moon attached to this. So it would come here. So this would be sent to the moon unmanned. It would be kind of like a supply depot, and then my Gemini Direct craft would come out, and they'd both have to land at the same site. So that's another technique I'm going to have to master for my future Mars missions. So this is what I'll be using to demonstrate it. But anyway, there we go. So there you can see the tran stage we were talking about. But yeah, so that is kind of a peek into some future plan stuff, and we have successfully put the Scansat into orbit of Venus. Oh, I can probably get rid of this sphere of influence alarm. But yeah, next thing I would expect, either unless I'm able to do something particularly visually cool and interesting with the aerobraking around Venus, the next thing I'll record will probably be, in this playlist, will be the launch of the manned orbital lab with that Titan 3. So look forward to that. So thanks for watching, RP-0 America. Goodbye.